In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create a metal texture, how to color our reflections, and how to control the very special anisotropy property. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started by just creating a metal from a very regular material, just by going down to create and hitting new material. So I'll just open that up, and let's talk about how you really wouldn't want to go about this. And this might be the way that you would approach it initially if you didn't know really kind of the best recipe for creating a metal. So you might go up here to your color. Let's say I want to have sort of a copper colored metal, and I choose a color for that. And then I add some reflections and maybe kind of turn those down a little bit. And you think, okay, you know, I could see what this looked like for metal. And it's just not going to work because honestly, this is the same approach you would have if you were trying to make something look like shiny plastic or kind of an enamel sort of glass. It's just not the same as metal. So the issue with this is that with metal, your color is not going to come through this color channel, because that's going to end up making it look more cloudy, and you're not going to get those more pure looking reflections. So you can turn off your color channel completely or turn it down very, very low. I'm just going to turn mine off completely. Now you can see we're getting the reflections, and it's on a much darker looking background. So we're already headed in the right direction. This, you can tell, looks really almost just like silver as it is. However, if I want to make it look copper, I can change the actual inherent color of the reflection right here. And I don't even have to go in and pick the color. If I'm happy with the one I grabbed from or I had here in color before, I can just left click and drag from the color channel over to the reflection channel and then back over to the color swatch. And you can see now we're getting a bit of that color. Now, you can see this area here where we kind of have this little clouded highlight. That is our specular highlight, and right now it's a little too diffused. So let's go into our specular channel and kind of pull this in tighter. You can see that almost starts to go away. So that's really going to make this feel a lot more realistic by just tightening up that specular highlight. Okay, so if you want to edit the color anymore, you would do it through the reflection channel. Maybe add just a little bit more red to it, turn that up a bit, maybe a little bit more saturation. And you can kind of see how this really is starting to look more and more like a realistic copper over here on the side. So let's just go ahead and apply this to the top of our salt shaker. So I'm just going to left click and drag that right onto those polygons. And then let's go ahead and render to the picture viewer. I'm just going to hit Shift R to do that. And you can kind of start to see the way that this copper behaves. Now there's a lot of things I could do with my lighting to kind of come in here and make some of the reflections maybe a little bit more pronounced. You can see I've got a little bit of a reflection kind of happening here and here. And this honestly looks decent. It's pretty good. However, we can make this look a lot better by using a shader that has the anisotropy property, and that's something that a regular material doesn't have. So let's talk about what that anisotropy property is as we begin creating another metal that's going to look a little bit more realistic than what you're seeing here. So this is a basic way to create metal, but I wouldn't say that it's the very best. So let's go ahead and X out of our picture viewer, and I'm going to come back down here to create, and this time instead of just doing new material, I'm going to choose shader. And there's several different shaders to choose from, and my favorite one for what we're going to do here is the Daniel shader. And you can't see it's going just out of the recording area, but it's just beneath this material here. So Daniel 5 down from the top, and you'll drop that in. You can see by default Daniel really appears to be kind of an enamel looking ball the way that we had before, and that's okay. We can work with that. So what I'll want to do first is go into my reflection, and we'll start to edit those colors. You can see I've got 3 different speculars with 3 different colors, which right now are attributing this kind of grayish look. Then we've also got our diffuse that has a color, which is similar to having a color channel. So if you wanted to turn that off, you could, or again, have it on but have that turned way down. So most of our color is going to come through the reflection, so let's just start trying that out. We'll go ahead and grab that sort of copper color here and the reflection edge color. Let's kind of grab one of those as well. Okay, so you can see we're getting some of that inherent color, but it's not quite the same as what we were working with before. So that is something to keep in mind. Now let's add a little bit of color through our diffuse, kind of this copper color. And that's getting closer to it, but it still has a little bit of that murky look, so we can go into our specular. And what I'd like to do now before we edit this any further is actually go ahead and apply that Daniel to the top of the salt shaker. Let's zoom in a little bit here, and then let's go ahead and turn on our interactive render region so that we can see what changes are we making and how is it affecting it. So you can see this still has a pretty enamel look. It's not totally looking like metal yet. So we can fix that. We'll just go back into that Daniel material. I'll kind of move this over to the side so you can still see that. And then let's start editing the colors here. Now, I would like the specular at the hottest point to be white. I want to show you though what that's actually controlling. So I'm just going to make it something crazy like blue, and you can see that switches to blue. So this is what that's controlling. So I like that being white. I like it being very bright looking. Now specular 2, let's go in here and I'm going to choose a color. Let's just choose a crazy color again so you can see what area that's recording. So you can see how it kind of diffuses out. The same will be true for specular 3. So let's choose kind of a reddish color, reddish orange color for specular 2. You can see that's really going to start to help give it that copper look. And then something even more deep red for that outer specular 3. And you can see, wow, that really starts to brighten that up, make that look more orange. Now I'm going to go into the diffuse and I'm going to turn the illumination down a little bit. So you can see that that really does start to give it more of that metal look by turning down the diffuse illumination. On the other side of that, we can come in and turn the intensity of the reflection up. So when I just click on reflection, you can come in here and start to turn that up. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting that look kind of that we had with our other material before, but we have a little bit more control over the way that the specular kind of casts this reddish look. But we still haven't talked about anisotropy, and that is this property here. It's not available in a regular material, and we can really do some good with this. So I'm going to go ahead and check that on, and you can see how we get this really harsh line through here. And this kind of gives it a brushed metal look. You can see how we get those little kind of streaks through here. However, the projection that it defaults to, just being planar, isn't really what we want. Because we have a circular lid, I'm going to change this to just radial auto planar. So go ahead and click that, and you can see how it kind of moves that. And now we get this beautiful looking highlight that really gives so much more of a metal look. Now you can go in and start playing around with your colors a little bit more, but just remember, turning up the intensity of that reflection is kind of the missing ingredient in the regular Daniel shader to get it to start looking like metal. This looks so pretty. Let's go ahead and add it to these little pieces that we've got right here. I would really like for those to also have that color on them. Very nice. And let's just go ahead and render it to our picture viewer just so we can see the major difference in these two. And you would probably want to go into your render settings and maybe turn on some of your anti-aliasing options, because I am getting a little bit of that here in the reflection. But overall, this area here is just beautiful. So much better. And if this is looking too red, you could maybe make that a little bit paler if you felt that that was necessary. Very, very nice. So in this lesson, we learned how to create a metal shader from the original Daniel shader. And in our next lesson, we're going to be talking about projection textures and working with transparent textures. And so if we wanted to put a little bit of a pattern on this, how would we go about doing that without editing our original material that we have here? So we'll be talking about how to create that in our next lesson.